This is time to hear the Dhamma, so close your eyes and bring yourself to this room with this body, in this life, the life that you have for now. Forget the past, it's just a dream. Don't worry about the future, it will come when it comes. Forget your job and all your duties. You had many jobs before. You were a farmer, you were a doctor, you were a professor, you were jobless, you were homeless, you were a thief, you were a killer, you were a god, you were a demon, you was just a little worm living in a cesspool. But all your actions have led you to this moment, to this life. In the grand scale of samsara, this life and all the lives you had is as small as this breath that you're breathing in now. So bring your mind to this breath. It is all you have, and it is all that matters. Try to find the beginning and the middle and the end. It ends like everything else, like your life and like all that exists. This time you are born in the time of the Buddha Dhamma, and this is your chance for liberation. So bring your mind to your ears and lend me your ears. Namo Dassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassang. Namo Dassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Dassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassang. Panchako ime Bharadwaja Dhammadhiteva Dhamme Dveda Vipaka Katame Pancha Saddha Ruchi Anussavo Akara Parivitako Ditti Nijana Kanti. These 5 things can be seen to turn out in 2 different ways. What 5? Faith, preference, oral tradition, recent contemplation, and acceptance of a view after consideration. These 5 lines are taken from quite an important sutta called the Changi Sutta. It's the 95th sutta of the Majjhima Nikaya. This is an incredibly deep and important sutta in our Lord Buddha's discourses, and a proper treatment of it would require many days and hours of explanation. So I hope that in this little time I have today, I can do at least a measure of justice to this truly great sutta that exemplifies the Lord Buddha's intellectual prowess. Despite this lack of time and the depth and the complexity, I chose this for today's topic because I believe it's essential knowledge for every Buddhist. Because there are so many viewpoints abound in the world. Now, as it was in Buddha's time, there are many different opinions, many different views to take. And these suttas, like this Chanki Sutta and Kalama Sutta, they help us navigate through this landscape of views so that we can find the right one and attain liberation. In this sutta, the Lord Buddha explains how we can preserve truth, and later on how to go about discovering truth, and in doing so displays the subtlety of the Dhamma, and also the honesty and caution required for the realization of the Dhamma. This preservation and discovery of truth is really the essence of the Dhamma Vinaya, because the Saddhamma is meant to be discovered individually through individual effort. Pacchattam veditabbo vinyuhiti. And the Lord Buddha, throughout his dispensation, has given us plenty of instructions on how to do this, from a variety of angles and paths, all within the Noble Eightfold Path. So here, Lord Buddha gives us an antidote to dogmatic views. And what is dogmatic? Dogmatic means clinging to a view or belief blindly and stubbornly, and calling every other view wrong and stupid. Idameva satcham mogamanyam. This is the only truth. All other ideas are wrong and stupid. I'm sure this is something that we've all heard a lot, and unfortunately something that we hold ourselves as well. I know I do, and that's one of my weaknesses, and this path is meant to try and get rid of all such clinging, such views. So I hope this speech would help you do the same. He states the weaknesses in our understanding when we cling to these 5 methods people use to confirm their beliefs. There's faith, saddha, and preference, ruchi, anussavo, which is oral tradition, but in those days that's how people preserved teachings, but now it's written down. So this could apply to sacred texts and scriptural traditions. And finally, akara parivitaka, or inferential reasoning, or recent contemplation. Is like logical thinking, step by step, to come just thinking about it. And ditti nijanakanti, which is acceptance of a view after consideration. If you look at most belief systems that are present nowadays and all throughout history, be it religious or even philosophies that affect people's lives, such as political, economical, judicial, and scientific or moralistic systems, they only rely on some of these 5 methods for proclaiming its authenticity and correctness. And the followers of such systems of thought use these 5 methods as a source of authority, and they criticize, demean, and even persecute others who do not agree with them. But the Lord Buddha, due to his qualities as a Buddha, shows us that these 5 methods alone are not enough to say that this is true and everything else is wrong, because they are lacking and unable to provide a complete understanding of the truth. This is the depth of the Dhamma. It is so subtle and so sublime that none of these methods that everyone else uses is enough to realize it. He is the only spiritual teacher in history to do this, to think so cautiously and so deeply and be able to comprehend the nature of reality at such a subtle and precise level that goes beyond all these common methods of justifying beliefs. These statements show us the absolute, uncompromising, unflinching commitment the Lord Buddha had for the pursuit of knowledge, for the preservation of truth. And as his disciples, these are the qualities that we must emulate, the commitments that we must uphold when carrying the torch of Dhamma through the dark caverns of this world. So I ask you all to question and investigate, and not just blindly believe in things just out of faith, just out of preference, just out of oral or scriptural tradition, or just out of logical thinking, inferential reasoning, or acceptance after consideration. So to get to this sutta, the nidana, or the background of this sutta, takes place when a Buddha and a large group of Sangha was residing in a park in a town called Opasada. This was a town of Brahmins, which was the priestly class and the highest caste in India at the time and now. The leader of this town and the owner of its lands was a very well regarded and respected Brahmin called Chanki Bamuna. While Chanki was sitting upstairs in his palace, he sees a large group of Brahmins that were walking around, and he was curious, so he went up to them and asked where they were going. And he tells them that we are going to see the Tathagata, the ascetic Gautama, the Samma Sambuddha. So becoming interested, he wants to go and see the Lord Buddha as well, because he's heard so many things. He heard that he is the first enlightened being in this era. So he wants to learn from him. But while he was going to go there, there's a large group of Brahmins other Brahmins who were staying in Opasada on business. And they became quite alarmed and scared when they learned that their leader wanted to go and see the Lord Buddha, because they were rivals at the time. And so they tried to beg him not to go, just being, "Sir, do not go and see the recluse Gautama. It is not proper. He should visit you." So there was so much reluctance and so alarmed to see that Changi was going to see the Buddha. This kind of shows the societal transformation that the Lord Buddha was started at the time in India, because the Brahmins were very, very worried about the Shramanas or the ascetics, especially Lord Buddha, because the Brahmin caste at the time, they kept a monopoly on knowledge and therefore spiritual liberation. They claim to be the voice of God. They claim to be the middlemen that you have to please and serve in order to gain favor with God and have a better rebirth. And this was done because they believed that karma came from doing perfect rituals, perfect sacrifices. And very conveniently, they are the only people who knew how to do this. So, and any threat to this monopoly was a threat to their status and their wealth and power. So Buddha carried out a very gentle rebellion against this elitism, because he discovered that it's not perfect rituals that is your kamma, it is your intention, your chetana. Chetanaham bhikkhave kammam vadami. So in saying this, in discovering this, he challenged this prevailing belief that good karma was a result of perfectly done rituals, which only the Brahmins knew how to do, and that's how they made their money. And also he told us that there is no need to think of an all-powerful God or a creator God. He showed us that there is no such thing as a soul, as an Atman. And he also told us that heaven is not permanent. So even if you go there, you're going to fall down back again. So all these teachings, this discovery of truth, was such a huge threat to the Brahmins' monopoly on knowledge and spiritual liberation. So the Brahmins at the time were the only people who had access to the sacred texts that they thought explained the universe. They were called the Vedas. And at the time there were 3 Vedas called the Rig Veda, Yagur Veda and the Sama Veda. Later on there was another one added called the Athar Veda. And this knowledge in these books, they guarded very jealously and very zealously. They didn't let anyone else access these scriptures, because these scriptures contain the theories on creation, on existence, and all the procedures for a perfect sacrifices, which all the kings and the commoners believed was necessary for prosperity, for a good harvest, for many sons on the throne, for good business. And because they had this knowledge, they were very well rewarded for it. But this good time and this party was over when the Lord Buddha came along and he democratized knowledge. He brought the fire of knowledge to the hearts of every human being, regardless of their status in society. This was a direct and deadly threat to the power of the Brahmins. He said that it is your conduct and your action that make you a Brahmin, not your birth. He said that possessions are a man's greatest sorrow. He said that the ways of a Shramana is the way to liberation, not a bunch of elaborate rituals in palaces. That truth can be found at the foot of a tree with dusty feet, wearing rags, living on what you are given. So this kind of reminds me of some Greek myth called Prometheus. I don't know if anyone's heard of it, but it's a very good analogy for how people in power, how power structures that hoard knowledge and that guard knowledge treat those who seek free access to it. So this Prometheus was a figure in Greek mythology. He was a titan. And it is said that he stole a sacred fire from Mount Olympus, which was where the Greek gods were living, which was their heaven. And at the time, humanity had no knowledge of fire. So they were freezing in the cold, in the dark. And Prometheus brought the gift of fire to humanity, and he gave it to us. And when the Greek gods found out, and they realized that they lost the power of fire over humanity, because they used to send it down in lightnings. This is a story anyway. So they got Prometheus, they captured him, and they chained him up to a mountain and had an eagle eat his liver every night. It would grow up back again in the morning, and every night the eagle would come back and eat it. So basically torturing him for all eternity, just for giving us the power of knowledge. So it's like this is how power structures throughout history would try to destroy and undermine people who try to free the common man from mental slavery by knowledge. This was seen in the Inquisitions and the blasphemy laws that still exist today, because knowledge is power. Like it's also seen in the book of Genesis. God, it says that God kicked out Adam and Eve out of the Garden of Eden because they ate from the tree of knowledge, the fruit of knowledge that gave them knowledge. So he condemned them to old age, sickness, and death. And Jesus was nailed to the cross because he said that the kingdom of God is within you. But as Buddhists, we need to understand that we are heirs to a great iconoclastic rebel and spiritual warrior, the Lord Buddha. He gave us the freedom to think and to investigate. He showed us our true potential as human beings. Never forget this fact, because the Lord Buddha never asked us to blindly follow him. He never told us that he was a god. He said that we humans are greater than gods. Even gods bow down to the Lord Buddha, or to any human with virtue and wisdom. So do not demean your human greatness by praying to gods. Do not desecrate your potential for enlightenment by blindly following dogmatic beliefs. You won't get kicked out of the Garden of Eden for being or subjected to eternal torment or nailed to a cross for seeking knowledge, for seeking wisdom in Buddhism. You will be rewarded with Nibbana if you investigate and question everything. So anyway, back to the sutta. The Brahmins, they kept trying to convince Chanki, So they kept trying to praise him. They praised his accomplishments and his knowledge and his status and even his good looks. But Chanki was a very wise and humble person, because even though he was so praised, he did not fall for it, and he went ahead with his plan to see the Lord Buddha. And after meeting the Buddha, the elder Brahmins were having a very friendly conversation, a philosophical conversation, I guess. The details are not given. But while this was going on, there was a young boy, a 16-year-old boy called Karpatika, who was interrupting this conversation. And this boy is revealed to be much more than he seems. He must have been a child prodigy. He knows all the three Vedas, I think, by heart. He's well learned, and Chanki and the elder Brahmins believe that he is capable of taking part in a deep philosophical conversation with elders. And so he takes part and so Lord Buddha, recognizing this fact, turns to him and looks him in the eye, letting him know that it is time for you to ask me a question. And Lord Buddha knows at the time that he will ask about the Triveda, which he does. So Chanki asks, Karpatika, and Lord Buddha calls him Bharadwaja. He asks him, Master Gautama, in regard to the ancient Brahmanic hymns that have come down through oral transmission, preserved in the collections, the Brahmins come to the definite conclusion, only this is true, anything else is wrong. What does Master Gautama say about this? Only this is true, everything else is wrong. Idameva satcham mogamanya. So this is an explanation. This is the definition of what I called a dogmatic view that the Brahmins were clinging to. So they were using their faith in the ancient texts and Vedas as an absolute authority. So they have absolute faith in what they believe, and in doing so they criticize every other belief. Now, think carefully about the way you hold a belief. Is this how you think as well? And if somebody else tries to teach you their belief or their religion, is this what they believe as well? And now you can see that this is not the right way to preserve the truth. And the Buddha answers with questions. And he usually does this. And I think this is a way, like this is a tactic that Lord Buddha uses to make the other person think about things and arrive at the right answer themselves without spoon feeding them information, instead of just saying, oh, you are wrong, it's like this. He asks them questions to make them think for themselves, why am I wrong? And it just makes them think and take them step by step to the right answer, and therefore gain a very good understanding of the matter. And this is also a kind of where it shows that the Dhamma is within you, is within us. We just need to know how to ask the right questions, and also be brave and courageous enough to find an answer for these very difficult questions to answer. And they're not difficult to answer because they're complicated, but they're difficult to answer because of our kilesas. The kilesas do not want us to answer these difficult questions, because it would destroy them. And this young Brahmin was actually very, very brave and very courageous in answering these questions, because these questions, they challenged everything he has believed his whole life, that his parents have taught him, that he was brought to believe is the very truth. His belief in his God, his belief in everything. He was ready to, he was honest in answering the Buddha. And in the end, he takes refuge in the Buddha. And in doing so, he can gain a chance at freeing himself, because he's honest and he's confronting his wrong beliefs. And I want to ask you, if this boy who grew up as a Brahmin can answer these honest questions honestly, why do we Buddhists find it so hard to ask ourselves difficult questions and find difficult answers for them? Like, since we could walk, we were taught how to bow down to the Lord Buddha. Since we could talk, we were taught how to pay homage to the Lord Buddha. We were taught how to say Namo Dassa Bhagavato Arahato. We were taught how to take refuge in the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. But do we really take refuge in the Lord Buddha Dhamma Sangha, or do we take refuge in hatred, greed and delusion? Why do we not have the same honesty this young Brahmin does? Is it so much easier to take refuge in greed, hatred and delusion rather than the Buddha Dhamma Sangha? So anyway, the Buddha asks Bharadwaja, and this is the name that Buddha calls Kapattika, and might be his official name. And he asks him this very important question: do these Brahmins who say that they are right and everybody else is wrong, do they know and see ahametam janami ahametam passami, what they claim is the only truth? And Bharadwaja has to answer, no, they do not know and see. And this is quite an important fact, know and see. That is implying direct knowledge, direct experience. Because in Buddhism, the Lord Buddha's system of knowledge, knowing and seeing and experiencing is absolute knowledge. It is something that doesn't come through the filter of our kilesas. It doesn't come through the filter of conceptualizing, verbalizing, but rather knowing exactly and seeing it. And Bharadwaja answers no. So the Lord Buddha then asks him if the teachers of the Brahmins going back 7 generations, do they know and see what they claim is the only truth? Again, Bharadwaja has to say no. And then finally, to drive the point home, Lord Buddha asks him whether the great seers of the past, called the Maharishis, who composed the Vedas thousands of years ago, do they know and see what they proclaim as the truth? And Bharadwaja has to say, no. And this is such a huge revelation, Now his entire worldview is shattered, because these Maharishis who wrote the Vedas, who started this religion, he has to admit that even they haven't seen what they are preaching. And this fact is actually evident in the Vedas. And there's a hymn in the Veda called the Nasadhiya Sutta. It is called a creation hymn. which shows that the writer is skeptical about whether the creator of the universe really did create the universe. And I've got this little sutta here. It's actually a long one, and I'm just having fun with it because I have no idea about Sanskrit or how to pronounce it, but it sounds really cool, so I want you to hear it. Ko adda veda kahiya pravochat kutta hajata kutta iyam visristahi arvag deva asya visarjanen atako veda yata ababhuva. But after all, who knows and who can say whence it all came, how creation happened? The gods themselves are later than creation, so who knows truly whence it has arisen? Whence all creation had its origin? The Creator, whether He fashioned it or whether He did not. The Creator, who surveys it from the highest heaven, He knows, or maybe even He does not know. So even the composers of the hymns, the Maharishis themselves did not know, and they admitted that even the God that they believe in might not know if he created the universe or not. So the Buddha asks, how could you hold on so dogmatically to your beliefs if you do not know and see the truth? Your teachers and even the great masters who wrote your Vedas do not know. They only have faith, they do not have direct experience. So how can you say that this is the only truth? So, and this also shows that Lord Buddha must have had a lot of knowledge on the Vedas, And then he uses a very funny analogy, very humorous analogy of a file of blind men. So the guy in front is blind, but he thinks he knows where he's going, and the guy behind him is blind, but he trusts the guy in front, so they're holding hands and they're just walking alone. And all the way back, everybody is blind, but they have no idea where they're going, but they believe that they know exactly where they're going. Sooner or later, they're going to fall down a cliff. And at this point, Bharadwaja must have been very lost, His whole view is shattered, his whole world. So he has to say, we don't just believe out of faith, Master Gautama. We also have a very long oral tradition. So now they're justifying their beliefs on accurately transmitting teachings. So they're trying to base their knowledge on, I have read a lot of books that might be true, that were written, And this is when Lord Buddha says the few lines that I spoke in Pali in the beginning. He states 5 methods again: ruchi, preference; saddha, faith; scriptural tradition, anussavo; logical thinking or inferential reasoning, akara parivitaka; and acceptance of view after consideration, ditti nijana kanti. And he says that these 2 things can turn out in 2 different ways. And by 2 different ways, the Lord Buddha means that something may be fully accepted out of faith, but it could be empty, hollow, and false. But something else that you do not accept out of faith may be true and mistaken. So true. So, what you have faith in could either be true or false, and what you do not have faith in could be true or false. And he is the only teacher in the history of philosophy or religion who ever said this. Every other teacher had to say, if you do not have faith in what I say, you will go to hell. So see how honest the Lord Buddha is. And this is the kind of qualities that we must embody as well. And he says he uses the same criteria for preference, for oral tradition and inferential reasoning and acceptance after consideration. He says that for a sensible person who is preserving the truth, it is not sufficient to come to a definite conclusion that this is true and everything else is wrong. We just need to say, I accepted this out of faith, but you do not say that this is the only truth and everything else is wrong. Similarly, if you read it in a book, I know because I read in a book, but you cannot say that everything else is wrong. You have to experience what you read in the book first before you say this. So you see the great caution with which we must treat the truth. And so thorough, so detailed, the Buddhist theory of knowledge. See, the understanding of the Dhamma goes far beyond all these methods. So, and now Bharadwaja, feeling even more lost, he says he has to ask, how do we define the preservation of truth? How do we preserve the truth? How do we respect the truth? And then Lord Buddha says, okay, if you have faith, you have to say, my faith is thus, but do not say this is the only truth and everything else is wrong. And that's what I described before. So we must clearly state how we arrived at the belief, but we cannot say that we know it. And this is a really good lesson for everyone. Just think about it. Every single thing that people believe in the world, they use these 5 methods to believe in it. But now we know that it is not accurate. So the Buddha is stating the inadequacy and how dogmatically clinging to our beliefs, and how being slowly only reliant on these 5 methods does not preserve the truth. It does not respect the boundaries of truth, because they can now turn out to be true or false. And this is very hard to accept. I know it was very hard to accept for me when I read this. And the truth is that the Dhamma is so subtle and is so nuanced, and to understanding in this way, it doesn't do it justice. It requires investigation and a very careful balancing act. It's like walking the path to nirvana. It's like walking on a razor's edge. If you lean too heavily on one side, you can fall off. So you need to keep the right balance. And then Lord Buddha says how to go about discovering truth. And how to discover truth is the most important part of the Dhamma. But I don't think I'll have enough time to go into it. You could find this out on the internet, the Changi Sutta. Because in Buddhism, only direct experience, like I said many times before, because I really want to drive the point home, it is considered to be accurate, only direct experience. So when it comes to faith, I'm not trying to say that it is wrong to have faith. It is right. It is necessary sometimes. So you need to understand that I'm not dismissing it, and nor did the Buddha. Faith has its uses, but we should not rely only on it. You need to think of Saddha like this. Do you know those NASA space shuttles that go off into space? They have this huge rocket on the bottom, with so much power that has to lift it off the ground, of the Earth's gravity. And then it falls off, and then there is a smaller rocket, and that pushes it up further, and that falls off. And then at this point, the space shuttle does not need any rockets because it's got momentum. It just keeps going. And that's the way that we should use Saddha as a way to start our practice, our Sila and Bhavana, because they give us this very big boost in the middle, in the beginning. But after a while, we have enough momentum to go by ourselves. But if you just have Saddha and you do not use this to practice Dana and Sila and Bhavana, you're wasting. You're not realizing anything. You're just saying, I have faith, but you're not using that faith to release yourself from suffering. You're not using that faith to make this world a better place. And it's like you will notice that when you keep Sila and Bhavana for longer and you meditate, the world just becomes much easier. Because we live in Mara's world, so it is hard to keep Sila and Bhavana. I know I was until last year, I never kept the Sila. But after time, you will notice that there are so many benefits and there is a momentum to your practice, and this takes over and you do not need faith anymore. And so you practice Sila and Bhavana on a day like this, and you may keep it up for a while, and if you will notice that you will start feeling sort of like, the eye in the storm. So in these pictures of typhoons and hurricanes and cyclones, there is this calm center in the middle that is not touched by the winds, that's not touched by lightning. you will feel like this, the eye of the storm, in this calm center, looking out at this, all these poor people getting caught up in the storm, getting caught up in the wind, having their flesh torn apart, drowning in waves and waves of despair and sorrow, getting struck by lightning, burned into cinders. You see this endless and churning and grinding mess that we call the world, the karma loka. So much madness around you. They're just endlessly assailed by winds that rip and tear, and you can look on at this world with a small smile on your face, like the Buddha statues that we have, in a stoic and grace, but not in a condescending or patronizing way. You're not trying to demean these people who are stuck in this world, because you know that that's where you came from as well. I know that's where I came from, and you know that you could fall back there at any time as well if you're not careful. So what the best thing we can do with our faith when we are in this eye of the storm is hold out our hand and hope that someone grabs it and then pull them back. And some people, they may spit on your hand and laugh at you, and some may grab this hand only to pull you back into the storm. And these people, they will call themselves your friends. So you need to know who your friends are. And during this very difficult time, we draw a little line in the sand around ourselves, and this sand is saddha, in this calm center. But over time, as you practice sila and bhavana more and more, this boundary will turn into a wall, it will turn into a fortress, it will turn into a tower. And no one can destroy this tower. No Mara cannot get to this tower. And that is the faith of a Sotapatti. And you see, a Sotapatti is someone who's gone beyond faith, because they have a glimpse of the state of Nibbana. So this person has seen the Dhamma that the Buddha has proclaimed. And we use the label of faith for a Sotapatti, but it is so much more than that, it's just knowledge. It's like saying, I have faith that the sky is blue. You don't need to have faith for that. In the same way, a Sotapatti does not need to have faith in the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. They just know that this is the way. And so you should use this faith to investigate, and not just to confirm your beliefs or use it as the only source of authority. This is not the Buddha's way. The Buddha's way is to investigate, to know and see, and after gaining direct experience, we accept it. Likewise, if you are confronted by those who seek to misguide you, either within the Dhamma or outside, you need to investigate whether faith is the only thing that you use to justify their beliefs. If so, accepting them as the only truth is not wise. You need to use your faith, again, in that person, in what they say, to investigate, for your practice. And I'm no Pali scholar, so don't quote me on this, but I don't think the English translation of faith can really do a justice to the full range of meaning of the word saddha or shraddha, like because saddha is more than faith. It's like I don't know. It requires experimentation and experience to grasp the full meaning of how useful it is. And then we come to ruchi, or preference, and this is normally something that we use to believe in things. Like it's easier for us to believe in someone we like, or something that they say, or hearing something that we like. But this is not how we can grow in the Dhamma. Because just because we like something does not make it true. Sometimes the truth is very bitter. But no matter how bitter it is, we must confront it, and we must swallow this bitter truth to learn and grow. Because it's only truth that can set us free. Liking something and basing our decisions on what we like can be very inaccurate. And in Buddhism, this is one of the things that we call agati, or biases. There are 4 agati. There's chanda agati, where we are biased to believe something because we like it. There's dosa agati, which is biased by hatred or dislike. And there's bhaya agati, which is biased by fear. And moha agati, based by delusion. And these biases can be intoxicating, and they taint our vision, and they make us incapable of seeing the truth. See, these biases are exploited by the world, by Mara, by advertising, by news media, by politics, by your friends, by your enemies, by everyone. And we are always led around on a short leash, like a dog on a short leash by these biases, because we are so influenced. And the practice of meditation and really the whole of the noble eightfold path is meant for the removal of these biases from our decision making process, from our minds, so that we can see clearly, so that we can think clearly and act clearly. And when it comes to liking something we hear and liking the person who says this, it is so easy to blindly accept and not think of the other side as well. Really, we have no right to judge or come to a conclusion on anything as long as we are influenced by liking this, because we are blinded. And a really good story that I like to think about when it comes to this bias of ruchi, and actually every other bias as well, is the story of King Raja Singh of Sitawaka. I think everyone's know him, Prince Tikaribanda. And he carried out a plot with his brothers to kill their father, I think Singhabau, and to divide up his kingdom into several small kingdoms. And Rajasingha became in charge of Sitawaka, and they succeeded in their plan. They killed their father, and he became the king, and he fulfilled his ambition for wealth and power. But now he was tormented. He was tortured by this terrible thing he did, the Anantariya Papa Karma. And he was so scared of the karmic consequences of this action. So he went to a monk and he asked him, how do I get rid of this karma? How can I be free from these consequences? But the monk told him the truth, as he should as a Buddhist monk. You have killed a parent, and this is the gravest, most terrible crime that someone can do, an Anantariya Papa Karma. So you have to face the consequences. There is no way out. But if you do good things, if you do meritorious actions, you could sort of lessen. And maybe when you get out, this would help you. And they would lessen the length and severity. But you have to pay your debt. But Rajasingha did not have the strength of character to accept this. So he went to this priest from South India and he sought counsel from this Hindu priest. And this priest was a very ambitious and cunning man. So the priest said, yeah, of course, we can wipe off this stain. All you need to do is make some sacrifices, do some pujas, and it's all good. And he loved hearing this, because it's like, oh, nice, I'm off the hook. Life is easy now, so all I need to do is do this. So he converted to Hinduism. And he ended up burning a lot of temples and killing a lot of monks. And he was so lost because of his cruelty, and he lost the support of his people, and there was a rebellion and he lost his life in it. So he believed and listened to lies because he liked hearing them. And he was so scared. He had the Chanda Agati and he had the Bhaya Agati, so he believed in these lies and he did even worse things. So this is the danger that there is in not being a clear thinker, in believing something just because we like it. It is important to accept the bitter root, because it is the only truth that can set us free. And again, like with everything, it's not so black and white. We can use ruchi, we can use liking as a tool as well to further our spiritual goals. And it's not wrong to like freedom. It's like chanda, niramisa sukha. It's a sort of, you like this, is the sort of happiness that you get from practicing meditation and practicing sila. And Buddha was not against this. You can rejoice in it, but we just shouldn't cling to it. And we actually try to cultivate these things because they help our practice. But again, not to get intoxicated by it. You can enjoy the bliss of meditation, but don't get stuck on it. So there is two sides to it. See, there's such a fine balance in Buddhism. You can use all these methods, but you should not cling to them. Sorry if it's confusing. And then we get to Anusavo, which is a dogmatic clinging to traditions, to sacred texts, and we see this everywhere. It's like people cling to their texts, and even unfortunately in Buddhism. And I'm sorry if that is uncomfortable to hear, that might make a few people angry, but this was hard for me to accept when I thought of this as well. But the fact is that sacred texts should be given their respect, but we need to understand they are also tools that we have to use, not just objects of worship that we should keep on shelves and pray to. They must be read, they must be analyzed, they must be critically deconstructed, and we must investigate the methods using our own experiences and experiment with them. And through these methods, gain direct personal experience. And only then can we say we know the truth. You know, it's like some people believe that these statements that the Lord Buddha spoke only applies to the Brahmins. But the Lord Buddha is so nuanced and such a deep thinker that I don't know if he would make such a blunt statement. I think he left all throughout the suttas ways to maintain the longevity of the Dhamma, like vaccines that he left that we can use in order to help ourselves and to help the Buddha Shasana. And this is one of those suttas. He mentioned the weaknesses inherent in relying on sacred texts as the only source of authority for knowledge. There is the Kesamutti Sutta, the Kalama Sutta, and in the Anguttara Nikaya. And he always referenced the limits of linguistics when describing certain dhammas, especially Nibbana. Words on paper or words spoken can only do so much. They can only be taken as sign. They can only be taken as a sign that points towards the truth, but not the truth itself. Okay. So as Buddhists, we should not be content just reading books and accepting everything outright, and even Buddhist books. So, and including this talk that I'm giving now, we should give them their due respect and then try them out. The Lord Buddha did not give us discourses in order for us to just listen and nod our heads, but to apply them to our lives and to free ourselves from this endless, churning flood of samsara. And then we get to Akara Parivitaka, or Inferential Reasoning. And this is, I think, one of the hardest things to accept as a weak source of authority in the modern world, because this is the bedrock of modern civilization and science. And I remember reading the Kalama Sutta many years ago, and I was immediately put off by it because Buddha rejected the authority of logical reasoning as absolute. Because at the time I was an atheist and a skeptic, and logic was sort of this altar that I prayed to, and I didn't like hearing that maybe it's not everything that I thought it was. But over time, I learned that the theory of logic is not so simple, because inferential reasoning is inherently weak. So, inferential reasoning is when you take a set of premises. So, you start with a few premises which you believe are true, and then you build up a chain of links to the top where you come up with an answer. And these are called inferences, and the answer is called the conclusion. And theoretically, this should be true. It's sort of like building a house on a foundation, So if you take the premise, I don't know, all Thais are from Thailand and Ajahn Pira is Thai, therefore he is from Thailand. That's inferential reasoning, and that's how it works. So you build a solid foundation and you build your house and you have a strong house, But so far so good. But there are cases where premises could be false and the conclusion is true. So let's say there is a premises, all French are good at poker, which is not true, and James Bond is French, which is not true. Therefore, James Bond is good at poker, which is true. So you see, you could start off with lies, and you could end up with the truth. So there are also examples where premises can be true and the conclusion false. So if we take the premises, apples are fruit and all bananas are fruit, therefore all bananas are apples. See, it makes no sense. But these are very simplistic examples, and there is a lot more to the criticism of logical reasoning. But it shows us that logical reasoning is not really a solid system that we can rely on. So it's not something that we can base our entire lives on, like certain secular moralistic systems and atheists believe. The fact is that we are all influenced by biases, especially delusion, until we are sotapannas. So any premise that we start off with can be biased. Therefore, it can be false, and any links that we use can be biased. And so the conclusion, even if we believe it is true, can be false. And can we really cling to it dogmatically and say this is the only truth? So we often actually use logical reasoning to convince ourselves that what we like or dislike is what we like or dislike. So you already don't like something, but you use logical reasoning to tell yourself why you like it or why you dislike it. You don't use it to critically analyze and to find out the truth. You use it to delude yourself even further. Even sometimes, even if there's very good evidence to show that what you like is not true, you still use reasoning, you still use inferential reasoning to believe that it is to believe that it is true that what you like. So until we are sotapannas who are not influenced by moha, we cannot really be very good logicians. We cannot make fully accurate claims based on inference. So this is why we should not cling to views based on logical reasoning. It's like building a huge, massive tower, like the Pisa Tower. It's on weak ground. The foundation is weak, and eventually it's gonna crumble down if you stand on it. This Dhamma, it goes beyond logic. But anyway, it also does not mean that we should dismiss logic and inference altogether. And that's the other extreme that we must avoid, because the Dhamma is a lot more nuanced than this. It has its uses, like every other tool I described before. It's like yoniso manasikara, or wise attention, is a kind of an inferential reasoning. So it's when you need to use it to develop progress on the path. And when we practice yoniso manasikara more and more, we develop its strength and accuracy as well. It's sort of like using meditative experiences and knowledge of the Dhamma gained through study to analyze certain things that we see in our lives. So it's like, an example is the other day, it was a very beautiful sunny day and I was walking outside and I could hear the birds chirping and it was so nice to hear. I was thinking, oh, this is amazing, it's like free music. Why do I need music? But then I remembered my ecology lessons a while back, and they were trying to talk about why birds sing. And they're not singing because it's beautiful, they're singing because they're scared. They're either scared of me because they think I would eat them, or they're scared of a cat, or they're scared of someone taking their territory, or they're screaming at someone to get away from my house. So it's all very lot of fear, so much fear. And I thought, oh, how terrible it is to be these little birds, to be born as an animal, always so scared, always having to scream in fear, jumping from branch to branch. But then I thought, like, am I as a human any different? We are so scared all the time. We are scared of our mortgage. We are scared of losing our jobs. We are scared of getting bad exam results, and we are scared of, I don't know, we are dying. We are scared of our people we love dying, and it's all these fears. And this is the dukkha arya satya. So it's just like, and then I noticed how nice it is to be a monk. That I don't have to think about all this stuff. And that's Chago, that's the Niramisa Sukha. Anyway, it's like this is sort of how you can apply Dhammic teachings in your everyday life if you keep an open mind. And the entire point in this sutta and the way of not clinging to views is so that we can always keep an open mind and keep our mind open to the Dhamma. Because the Dhamma is not just in books or on your meditation mat or in a temple, it's everywhere because nature is Dhamma. It is in your mind, it's in every single moment in your lives. It's something that you can learn if you are receptive, if you keep an open mind. It's almost like your karma is leaving little clues, little breadcrumbs all over the place in every moment, every second of your life, in every place you go, so that you can pick up this crumb and gain a little bit more wisdom. And this little trail of crumbs will lead you to Nibbana. And this is like, it's so amazing, it's like, it's everywhere. Like you can learn Dhamma from everything. You can learn Dhamma from birds. You could learn Dhamma from, I don't know, even reading the Quran. The people are not gonna like hearing this, but it's the truth. Like you can learn anything. You can learn the Dhamma from everything because it is everything. And when you understand Dhamma, you understand nature. So it goes beyond all conceptualizations and discursive thought. And this is like on the way to finding the truth. Like we need to use conceptualizations and discursive thought, but it is not the truth itself. So if this whole thing was very confusing to you, I'm sorry. But I wanted to show you how sophisticated the Lord Buddha's way of thinking is, and also how open he was. And how many times do we hear people claiming to be the prophet of God or the smartest person in the world, so you have to listen to me. But the Lord Buddha shows us that there are weaknesses in clinging to speculative views. The Lord Buddha showed us that he was so humble, he told us that we have the power to think for ourselves and we need to be so careful. And he struck down all these methods that people use as a lifeblood to maintain their system of beliefs. And these lessons we need to keep on going. They're not just for the Brahmins in this sutta, they're for us. This is a vaccine that he left so that we can keep the Buddha Sasana alive. And it's like then we can walk this tightrope, we can walk on this razor's edge and we can stay safe. And like, so I hope you get the aim of my message, and to show that understanding the Dhamma requires a very open mind. And if you keep an open mind and learn the Dhamma from everything, anywhere, I'm sure that you will reach a good place. So inquire, investigate, and do not just glance at the surface and accept things. Dissect, analyze, experiment, but most importantly, practice Sila and Bhavana, because it is these that develop your ability to investigate and see clearly. Don't leave it to just a special occasion like today. Make it part of your life. You need to keep searching and keep looking, and like our guide and teacher, the Lord Buddha, never compromise on knowledge. And let's not allow ourselves to be like that file of blind men stumbling in the dark and hitting corners and falling off the cliff. Take on the gradual training of Sila, Bhavana and Dana. Awaken and become a torchbearer of the Dhamma, piercing the darkness of this world, the darkness of ignorance and delusion with the light of the Dhamma. So with that call to arms, I will stop my talk. Thank you very much. Okay. Okay. So I would, sorry, I'm not sure about the traditions. So I would want to bless everyone here. Thank you all for listening, and may the Dhamma help free you from all suffering, and everyone you love. Thank you.